Hi everyone, also a warm welcome from my side. In the next 15 minutes, I want to present how climate change impacts companies, their business models, and the long-term value creation. But in the beginning, I want to briefly introduce myself and Ernst & Young, or short EY. EY is one of the so-called Big Four accounting firms and offers several assurance and consulting services like tax advisory, transaction advisory, or management advisory. We are more than 1,000 people in 4 locations in Austria. I started Umwelt- und Nachhaltigkeitsmanagement at the IMC and graduated in 2017. Shortly after, I started at EY in the Climate Change and Sustainability Services Department, and my focus is on non-financial reporting assurance and sustainability advisory, which includes climate change and ESG risk management, for example. Now let's start. What you can see here are news snippets that should picture the priority of climate change for businesses, governments, local communities, and also for investors. With the Fridays for Futures initiative in 2019, climate change finally reached the main floor of the political and economic discussions. For example, there have been climate claims against corporations which perceived as perpetrators of climate change, or claims brought by investors against corporations for failing to account for possible risks to carbon-intensive assets, or for failing to disclose risks to business models and value change in their financial reporting. Even during the COVID-19 crisis, climate change remains an important topic for businesses and governments, especially in relation to state aid for big companies. What you can see here is an overview of the top 5 macroeconomic risks in terms of impact published annually during the World Economic Forum in Davos. As you can see on the left side of the table, in 2010, the top risks globally were dominated by economic risks. These are the blue ones. But in the last decade, economic risks were replaced by climate-related risks. 4 of the 5 top risks are now related to the change in the climate. This shows that the business world is well aware of the risks related to climate change. And that's because businesses are already impacted by climate change. Let me picture these impacts. According to the Swiss Re Institute, economic losses from natural catastrophes accounted for about $155 billion in 2018 and triggered $76 billion in insurance payouts. Also, 2018 was one of the warmest years on record, and there's a clear link between global warming and major events like heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and floods. These all can cause significant damage to infrastructure and assets. On the figure, the dotted line, the dotted light blue line, there you can see the trend over the last decades. The share of losses related to extreme weather events increased drastically. This importance of climate change in the business world has also been recognized by regulators. For example, the European Commission therefore published a guideline for reporting climate-related information. The included recommendations have not only implications on the reporting of the companies, but also on how companies should rethink their business model and their strategy. because companies that do not appropriately consider their business model and strategy in light of climate change may both cause negative effects on the climate and experience negative impacts on their business, such as on the profit and loss statement, financing, future regulatory burden, and the license to operate. On the other hand, identifying new climate-related opportunities may strengthen the business model and the earnings outlook of a company. So the key message here is that business activities that are harmful to the climate potentially have serious long-term negative impact on the business itself. What kind of impact is that? Until 2030, the European Union and also Austria, for example, set ambitious targets in order to be in line with the 2-degree or 1.5-degree target from the Paris Agreement. These political actions and goals can affect the business. The transition to a low-carbon economy may result in potential impacts that are called transition risks. Examples are changing climate protection regulation, changing markets, or other low-carbon technologies, as well as the loss of reputation. But even if there is no strict climate action happening, business will be faced with physical risks like extreme weather events, flooding, droughts, and landslides, as I already mentioned before. But it's also possible that companies witness the breakdown of their whole supply chain, or at least part of it. This background and to help companies and other financial market participants to understand their climate risks, the Financial Stability Board of the G20 nations and their task force on climate-related financial disclosures established a set of recommendations for consistent corporate disclosures. These should also guide companies how to manage and mitigate climate-related impacts. The TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, has received significant support from leading companies and organizations around the world since their recommendations were released in June 2017. The recommendations are structured in 4 key areas that reflect core elements of how organizations operate. I want to give you a short overview of these key areas and the related questions companies have to consider. The first area is governance. This includes how climate change or climate risks can be integrated into the business and to what extent these are dealt with at the executive and supervisory board level. Second, there's the area of the strategy. How climate risk on business strategy and financial planning are considered and how these can be incorporated into future business decision making. Then there's the risk management. Companies should disclose the process used to identify, assess, and manage climate-related risks. And last but not least, the metrics and targets, which are linked to the aspects of the business strategy and used to assess, to manage risks and opportunities. Implementing the recommendation may require changes to governance and risk assessment processes and may take quite an effort for organizations to be in the position to generate valuable information about their risk exposure and contributions to climate change. But it helps to integrate climate change issues into the business model in a structured way and provides information to investors and other stakeholders to help them make informed decisions. A global EY study analyzed the reporting quality according to the TCFD recommendations I explained before. Regarding the quality, the United States and parts of Europe score the highest. In the US, it's mainly because companies are faced with different kind of shareholder resolutions or class action which continue to grow. In Europe, mainly France, Spain, the UK and Germany are the leaders, and they're driven by local pressure from the local market regulator. The low performer globally is China. But how is the situation in Austria? So now let's see how the Austrian companies are embracing climate change and climate action. We at EY Austria analyzed the corporate reporting of companies in the Austrian prime market in 2019. These are the big listed companies in Austria. As you can see in the left figure, the vast majorities of companies identified climate change or energy, which is closely related to climate change, as a material topic for their reporting. But only a small number seems to be acting and published goals for emission reductions. You can see there's a discrepancy. The ambitions are still very low, but in fact, we urgently need bold actions to reduce the global CO2 emissions. This ambition level is also visible in other aspects of corporate reporting. We also analyzed how the globally most anticipated business initiatives to tackle climate change are addressed in the Austrian prime market. Hardly any company set a science-based target. What is a science-based target, you may ask? A science-based target provides companies with a clearly defined pathway to future-proof growth by specifying how much and how quickly they need to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Furthermore, only a tiny number of the companies explicitly reported according to the TCFD recommendations I mentioned. I personally hope this will change in the future and companies embrace the opportunities related to climate action, not only to stay profitable, but also to contribute to sustainable development. We at EY support companies becoming fit for climate change with our climate change and sustainability services. This already marks the end of my presentation, and now I want to give you insights how to join EY if you're interested. We are hiring at the moment.